Oh, good morning. Thank you so much, Andy. It is a pleasure to be here. My hope for you during our time together is that you are well caffeinated, because it is early. And people ask me sometimes if I drink coffee, and I say no. That's what anxiety's for. I like my hip trip au natural. My jitters. It's like cortisol, God's caffeine. Right? It's a wonderful thing. And so anybody who knows me, I have some friends here who knows me. They know I run a little neurotic. I get very nervous before I speak, which means I talk really fast, so at least it won't be boring. But we're going to cover a lot of material in a short amount of time, and so if you don't mind, I'm going to talk pretty fast. Get whatever note-taking devices you use and buckle up because we are going to move. Sound good? All right, so by way of introduction to this, our firm, my colleagues at the firm, we are passionate about human performance. We obsess about our own performance. We want to get better. We obsess about, not to be weird, we obsess about your performance, especially when we have permission and a signed contract. And raise your hand if you've ever been unsolicitedly coached by someone. Yeah, that's right. At the firm, we like to say that getting coached is like holding someone's hand. It goes better if they want you to do it, right? Kind of a thing. So we do obsess about your performance, especially when we have permission, and especially about the things that matter most. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two big ideas, and one you probably heard before and one you probably have not heard before. We're going to mix it together and make a stew that I think is going to be really valuable for you this morning. And so the first big idea comes from the Swedish psychologist, Dr. Eric Anderson, okay? And he studied 50 years learning how the best people get really ridiculously good at what they do, which is totally a Zoolander reference for those of you paying attention at home. Really ridiculously good at what they do. And what he discovered over 50 years of research is that it takes on average about 10,000 hours to get really good at what you do. Raise your hand if you've heard about this before. Yeah, 10,000 hours of intentional practice. Yeah, that's right. To go from rookie to royal, to go from beginner to best in class, 10,000 hours of intentional practice. It was made famous by Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote the New York Times best-selling book, Outliers, and he called it the 10,000 hour rule, right? So we're on the same page so far. What you probably haven't heard of is another number done by an organizational psychologist named Dr. Andrew Neighbor. Dr. Andrew Neighbor is an organizational psychologist out of the Rand Corporation in Santa Monica. And he studied the various ways that people use their time. And what he discovered was another chunk of time that was called 100,000 hours. And what he discovered is that you and I are going to spend 100,000 hours doing a specific thing in our lives. And no, it's not vacation. It's not spending time with your family. It's not standing in line at the DMV. No, you are going to spend 100,000 hours of your one and only life working. It's okay to cry. That's what usually happens. Like if I'm at cocktail parties and I bring this up, you can kind of see the light in people's eyes begin to fade, which is why I don't get invited to many cocktail parties. So 100,000 hours you're going to spend working. And I have a confession. I love this number. I love it. My colleagues at the firm, we love this number. And it's going to even get more weird. Just bear with me for a second. We actually love work. We love it. Now, we don't always love to work. I'm as lazy as the next guy. But we love the idea of work, that you can actually dedicate a portion of your life to getting good at something, offering that a value, and then being rewarded for it. Like, we find that exciting. We find that romantic. We find that even sacred. And, so I have an executive coaching firm, and at any given time, our firm spends 1,500 hours every month working with over 500 clients in over 100 different industries, ranging from, of course, athletes in every sport to the franchises themselves, to the owners of the franchises. We work with Fortune 500 companies like Andy said, and we have our clients are on the covers of every major magazine in the world. This is exciting for us. A couple months ago, one of our clients was featured in the Wall Street Journal for doing something good, and that was exciting. And then a few weeks later in the New York Times, a few of our clients and our coaches together were featured for doing something positive. And so we've been doing this for about 10 years, and we're getting pretty good at it. And so what I want to do is I want to pull together a bunch of ideas, and we're going to call it the 100,000 hour rule. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the 100,000 hour rule. And by way of introduction to this, what we're going to do is we're going to take two numbers like Telly from Sesame Street. We're going to push them together. Anyone know that reference? Right? Okay, so we're going to start with saying it takes 10,000 hours to get really good at something, but you're going to spend 100,000 hours working. We're just going to push that a little closer together. It takes 10,000 hours to get good at something, but you're going to spend 100,000 hours working. You with me so far? 10,000 hours to get good at something, 100,000 hours working. Maybe we can put it like this. You're gonna spend 10,000 hours to get really good at something, but you're gonna spend 100,000 hours working. Or maybe we could do it this way. It takes 10,000 hours to get really good at something, but you are going to spend 100,000 hours working. Now, if you're anything like me, when you start seeing something like this, a question pops into your head. If it only takes 10,000 hours to get really, really good at something, what do we do with the other 90,000 hours? Another way of saying this is, what do you do after you're good at what you do? And I love this question. Of all the questions we're gonna talk about this morning, this is my second favorite. We're gonna get to my favorite here in a little bit. This is my second favorite question. This is such a powerful question, and here's why. Because if you're here this morning, you probably already have your 10,000 hours at something. You've been doing it for a while. In this room, and all of our clients have their 10,000 hours for sure. And so you don't really need help knowing how to get good at something. You need to know what to do after you're good at something. And our clients, we say it this way, like we're not necessarily helping them become successful, we're helping them learn what to do with success. It's like a dog when it catches a car. Like now what do I do, right? And so I love this question. The other reason why I love this question is because as coaches, our coaching is called inquiry-based, which means we ask a lot of questions. And sometimes it can be a little annoying. Dan Moore, who wrote the foreword to our book, he's the CEO of the Rockefeller Group, and Rockefeller was started by John D. Rockefeller in the 1920s, and they've built some of the most amazing architecture in the country, including 30 Rockefeller Center, and so he gets to steward that company in this season of its life, and he wrote the foreword to our book, and I was so grateful, and you're supposed to say nice things in the foreword of a book, and he said, yeah, Jason, when we started working together, he asked me a ton of questions, and it was really annoying. And so then I read that and I reach out to him and say, hey, Dan, I don't think you know what forwards are supposed to be. And he said, did you finish reading? And I said, no. He goes, finish reading the forward. And so I finished it. He goes, but then I learned over time that oftentimes it is more powerful to ask a question than be given an answer. And that is true. Questions are a leader's most powerful asset. I wanted to park here just for a second. Questions are powerful. Whenever I ask you a question, neurologically they're powerful. Whenever I ask a question, a phenomenon happens called the arrested effect, which means when I ask you a question, the question itself arrests your attention. It captivates your attention and it initiates in you what's called an instinctual elaboration. Instinctual elaboration, which means you actually have to, there's just a natural need to respond. So if I were to ask you what your name was, you would actually have to fight against your natural impulse to answer, right? Like if I say, hey, what's your name? You just have to answer and you have to actually fight against that. They did a study where they studied 40,000 people and they asked them one question: do you plan on making a major car purchase in the next 6 months? And just by asking the question, the rate of car purchase went up 34%. Another question they asked was, who are you planning to vote for in the next election? Which I thought maybe we could just get into our tables and answer that right now. No. But just by asking the question, the probability of people voting doubled. So whether it's pulling a lever or making a major purchase, questions are powerful. In fact, we want to say it this way: your life is shaped by the questions you ask and the questions you don't. Your life is shaped by the questions you ask and the questions you don't. In fact, what I want to suggest is that at any given moment, your life is being shaped by questions you are asking that you don't even realize that you are asking. And part of what coaching does is we slow things down and we help you find out the questions that you are asking that you don't realize you're asking, and then redesign those to increase your performance. Because here's the deal: if you want to upgrade your performance, you got to upgrade your questions. If you want to upgrade your performance, you got to upgrade your questions. And my favorite way of getting into this is a tool that we use at the firm. It's one of my favorite tools, and it's called the performance pyramid. I'd like to show it to you real quick. So here's how the performance pyramid works. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have what's called low performance. Everyone say low performance. Raise your hand if you've ever met a low performer. Raise your hand if they're with you right now. No. All right, so low performers are asking a specific kind of question. They're saying, what's the least I can do and not get fired? And here's what's fascinating about this is whenever I do this with a room full of people who are talented and gifted and have their 10,000 hours in, immediately they're like, oh, that's not me. And here's what's fascinating. You can actually be a high performer with a low performance mindset. And my favorite example of this comes from one of my colleagues in the firm, and she's a recovering lawyer. And she told me this story one time, I couldn't believe it, where a senior partner would get a big case, and then the senior partner would go walking through the hallways looking for junior partners to enroll in helping with the case. And she was more of a junior partner there at the time. And men and women, grown men and women, past the bar, educated, wearing $5,000 outfits, $1,000 shoes, they would literally dive under their tables and hide so that the senior partner couldn't find them to give them more work to do, right? High performer Low performance mindset. We're on the same page? So that's a low performance mindset. Now, if you want to upgrade someone's performance, you want to go to the next level. And so we call that performance. Everyone say performance. Okay, now performance is, it's great. They're asking the question, how do I do a good job? How do I do a good job? And this, by the way, is what most people are asking in most organizations most of the time. How do I do a good job? And it's not too hot, it's not too cold. It's like the Applebee's of performance, right? It's not Del Taco. It's not going to destroy your digestive system, but you're also not going to propose to your girlfriend there either. Right? You're on the same page. So this is okay, but it's not great. And so if you want to upgrade that, when we go to the top of the pyramid, at the top of the pyramid we have what's called, of course, high performance. Everyone say high performance. Now this is where things get interesting because high performers aren't asking the question, of course, what's the least I can do and still keep my job? They're not asking the question, how can I do a good job? They're asking a different kind of question. They're asking the question, how can I be the best? I love this question. This is a great question. How can I be the best? And high performers, you know who you are. Oftentimes, high performers drift into careers that are highly measurable and usually public, like professional athletes. Professional athletes, doctors, lawyers, salespeople. They love to know where they stand in the organization so that they can go towards the top. And if you're in an industry that doesn't measure things, you will create your own measurements so that you can compete against other people, even if they don't know they're competing against you. Right? And it's a wonderful thing. Being a high performer is a good thing. When I was younger, that's all I wanted to be. I wanted to be, like in my job and things like that, I wanted to be a high performer. And I read books on high performance, high performing teams, peak performance, and all those books are like super valuable. And I highly recommend all of them. Like anytime you're investing in yourself is a good thing. And there was a problem, but I didn't realize there was a problem until I started doing some informal consulting with now they're a Fortune 10 company. So it's like, they're inventing robots that are going to kill us all someday. It's going to be great, right? And so having some conversations with them and their team, and I said, hey, so like, what's the problem? And they said, we're a team full of high performers. I said, well, thanks for describing that, but what's the problem? And they said, we have a team full of high performers. And I said, yeah, but what's the problem? And then they got mad at me and they're like, Jason, we're telling you what the problem is. We have a team full of high performers. And my whole life, I thought being a high performer was the point. I had never described it as a problem. And that opened my eyes and the eyes of my colleagues where we started exploring what we call the high performer problem. This is so important, the high performer problem. When you have people who perceive themselves to be high performers, have a high performing mindset, or you're building high performing teams, it will create a predictable series of indicators. And there's a bunch of them, but I'm gonna run through 3 of them right now. So the first one is oftentimes, not all the time, oftentimes they become closed to feedback. Anybody ever been around someone who's closed to feedback? Yeah, a little diva-ish, right? If you try to like give them coaching or help them out or whatever, it's like you just burped in front of British royalty. They're like, how dare you, kind of a thing, right? Yeah, because they're at the top, they have arrived. Like, who are you to give them more information? Which oftentimes then feeds into this next thing, which is this is awesome. They are simultaneously overwhelmed and bored. Overwhelmed and bored. Now they're overwhelmed because they perceive themselves to be at max capacity, and they're bored because they are not at max capacity, right? But you can't give them feedback because of the aforementioned number 1, right? Which leads to then a third thing. And actually, what's fun about this is then when we try to give them feedback, they're like Maximus from Gladiator, like, are you not entertained? Do I not bleed for you? Have I not given my life for you? That kind of thing. Like that's oftentimes what happens with high performers. They don't say it to your face, but they say it to their spouses behind your back. And then the third piece is, and this is toxic, but not necessarily intentional. They become protective of their position on the team. Now this makes total sense. If you perceive yourself to be at the top and you want to stay at the top, there's 2 ways to do that. One is for you to grow, right? But if you are closed to feedback and overwhelmed and bored, you're probably not going to do that. The second thing is, if you want to stay at the top, is to keep other people from getting to the top. And sociopaths do this on purpose. I think most people do it on accident. And what they find themselves is a little competitive, and they find themselves, and some of you have experienced this before, maybe some of you can say you've done it a little bit, not proud to admit it, totally fine. And then others of you maybe experienced it before, where it just seems like other people are pushing you down and not allowing you to thrive. And as a high performer, you are kind of pushing people down because there's only so many spots at the top, and so you feel threatened by them, even if you don't sit around long enough to put words to it. And so because of this and several other things, this is the high performer problem. And so then we started trying to figure out, our team started trying to figure out, like, well, how do we help these people? Because this is, like, these are the people who, like, run the world. These are high performing teams. How do we serve them to help them get out of their own way? We started asking this question: what's beyond high performance? What's beyond high performance? And here's what I want to suggest. If you don't have an answer to this question, I guarantee you there's a cap on your leadership potential right now. If your team doesn't have an answer to this question, I guarantee you've got a cap on your leadership, and your team's got a cap on this leadership right now. What's beyond high performance? And you are vulnerable, like a compromised immune system. You are more vulnerable to the high performer problem. And so our firm for years worked on material for this, and we worked with clients, and then what started emerging was a concept that we call Metaperformance. Everyone say Metaperformance. Now, two things here. One is, you might be thinking, some of you are clever and you build designs in your head and you're like, well, then what's after Metaperformance? Ultra mega performance, kind of a deal. But what I want to suggest is Metaperformance is almost like a different category of performance. The word meta, of course, is Greek. It stands for beyond. When Plato wrote his treatise on ethics, it was called metaphysics. When the spiritual activist Paul of Tarsus said in the first century, he said, do not be conformed any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds. That Greek word for transformed is where we get the word metamorphosis, which kind of conjures up imagery of like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. And so what we want to say is Metaperformance is constantly reinventing what high performance is for you. Metaperformance is constantly reinventing what high performance is for you. And it asks this question. So metaperformers are not asking, what's the least I can do? They're not asking, how do I do a good job? They're not asking, how can I be the best? They're asking a fundamentally different kind of question, which is, what am I capable of? Oh, I said at the beginning that what do I do after I'm good at what I do is my second favorite question. This is my favorite question. This is such a great bench press to lift. This is fantastic. This has got legs to it. This has got juice to it. Oftentimes we say in our work that there are some questions you answer and there are other questions you answer to. Right, they become an authority in your life. You keep going back to them over and over and over again because they have more and more and more for you. I'll give you a quick example. If I were to ask my wife, what's her favorite kind of flowers? That has an answer. Boom, answered it, got it, done. Peonies, they're great, right? If I were to ask, what does it mean for me to explore what I'm capable of as a husband? Oh, I'm going to be exploring that until I die, right? And that's not a bug, that's a feature. Right? That's a perk to that question. It's going to continually let me wrestle with it. And as I wrestle with it, beautiful things begin to happen. And so what I want to do for the rest of our time is I want to talk through I really love this. Thank you so much for having me. These are some of my favorite conversations to have. I want to talk through some of my favorite toys. We're going to call them tools because that sounds like a grown-up thing. But we're going to talk through some of my favorite paradigms that we use with ourselves and with our clients to help them go beyond high performance. So we got 4 tools. Here we go. The first tool, this one's the longest one. You got to bear with me. I got a lot to talk about with this. But the first one is shift your perspective. And I know it's like in Sunday school or whatever, but go ahead and say perspective. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, shift your perspective. Now, at any given moment, there's actually 2 pieces to this. The first perspective that you want to shift is the perspective you have of yourself. So we say this a lot in the firm. We say at any given moment, every leader has the same leadership challenge. Every leader in this room, every leader watching from the other campuses has the same leadership challenge. And it's not what you think. Oftentimes when we talk about leadership challenges, we're talking about hiring and firing and budget and getting along with that jerk coworker or like succession or fundraising or whatever, right? Oftentimes those occur to us as our biggest leadership challenges. And those are big challenges. Those are big leadership challenges, but they're not the core one. And what I want to suggest is the core leadership challenge of every leader, including me, including you, is every leader drastically underestimates themselves. Every leader drastically underestimates themselves. Another way of saying that is you have a diminished perspective of your own capacity. And what we want to do is we want to shift your perspective of yourself. My favorite way of illustrating this is, one of my former clients, a guy named Jeff Lambert. Jeff Lambert, we have had a ball working together. We worked together for years. And we had so much fun that he wrote an article in Fast Company about how much fun we had. And it's an amazing experience working with him. It was one of the best clients I've ever had. And when I first met him, he was successful. He had a PR firm. He had a yacht, if you're into that kind of thing. And so that was fun. But when we started working together, I found out that he liked cars. And so I said, hey, Jeff, he said, what? I said, you remind me of a McLaren, which is a really nice car. And he liked that. He liked that very much. He was like, oh yeah, V8 twin turbo, carbon fiber body. Oh yeah, that's good, that's good. I said, yeah, it gets even better. I was like, you're like a car, you're like a McLaren going 120 miles per hour. Oh, he's like, oh yeah, 0 to 60 in 2.7 seconds, 500 horsepower. There's more horses in my car than the Kentucky Derby. I was like, yeah, that's right. You're going 120, and by the way, this is fast. 120 miles is faster than most people have ever gone in their lives in a car. Not me, but 120 miles in a car. And other people are probably really impressed with how fast that is, and that's fantastic. He's like, yeah, that is fantastic. He said, here's the problem. He said, what's that? I said, a McLaren tops out at 205 miles an hour. I said, how about you and I, in our coaching, explore ethically, safely, sustainably, what 205 miles per hour looks like for you. We shifted his perspective. And we worked together for 5 years, and we had a ball. He doubled down on his family. He doubled down on his marriage. He, of course, scaled the company, became a top 40 PR firm, exited. He bought a tech company called Ticker that now is just blowing up, which is exciting. And then he bought an MMA fighting league like you do. And we were talking a little while ago, and he said to me, he goes, you know, Jason, if you would have told me what my life would be like now as I really leaned in, I would have told you it was impossible. But now it's just like an ordinary Tuesday. And what we like to say is, high performers like to go fast. Meta performers love to see how fast they can go. High performers love to go fast. Meta performers love to see how fast they can go. So that's the first shift. The second shift is even more fun to talk about, because it's not just about shifting the perspective of you, it's about shifting the perspective, and the word that I like to use is shifting the perspective of your craft, of your art form. And you might say, hey Jason, I'm an assistant, I don't have an art form. And I'm like, shame on you. Every job is an art form. Every job is a craft. Every position in any organization providing any value in some kind of ecosystem is this sacred. It's like Picasso painting, it's Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. Every job has this thing. What I like to say is, you have a lot more to offer your job, and your job has a lot more to offer you. And my favorite example of this is, so currently I'm coaching the CEO of an NBA team, and he's talented, smart, ambitious. He's one of my favorite people. He's fantastic to coach, so much fun to coach. But that's not what I appreciate about him. What I appreciate most about him is that he doesn't make fun of me for not knowing a lot about basketball. Because I don't. And we coach professional athletes. In fact, some of the coaches in our firm are former professional athletes, and they mercilessly make fun of me for not knowing about sports. But this guy doesn't mind so much. And so we're having a ball working together. And I brushed up. I know some things about sports. I know some things about basketball. Like I know Dr. James Naismith invented at the University of Kansas. I know the GOATs. I know Michael Jordan, LeBron James. There's another one in there somewhere. No, Kobe Bryant. I know that. And I know some obscure trivia because I was raised by a father who loved sports in the 80s. And so there's actually one basketball player who set all sorts of scoring records, still holds over a dozen scoring records. And it was before the shot clock and before the three-point line. And it was a guy named Pete Maravich. Anybody heard of Pete Maravich before? Yeah, a few of you have. Yeah, Pistol Pete Maravich. And, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe, they've actually said that Pete influenced their game. And Pete wasn't the GOAT, but he has inspired the GOATs. And what's interesting is I actually got to meet Pete one time, years ago. He came to our church. And he actually have a signed basketball from Pete Maravich, which is one of my most prized possessions. And he told me a story, not told me, but he told a story when I was young that I'll never forget. It was about his dad. His dad was a coach at Clemson College. And he gets a bunch of these 18-year-old knuckleheads together, and he's gonna pep them up. And he drew a circle. And he said, this circle here represents everything that I know about coaching. This circle represents everything I know about coaching. Then he drew a big circle. And he said, but this bigger circle represents everything there is to know about basketball that has never been discovered. And then just for fun, he put a little dot there, and he said, he's talking to players, he goes, and this is how much you all know. And then he goes, combined. They're young. And he said, hey, look, if you think that you're here because of this, we are gonna have a real problem. He said, but if you're here because of this, if you're here because you want to explore what's possible in basketball, we're going to have the time of our lives. And this metaphor has stuck for me. When we hire people, I draw this circle. I change it a little bit. But when I hired my chief of staff, I said, hey, look, this circle here represents how much you know about being a chief of staff. Not me, you. How much you know about being a chief of staff. That's why we're hiring you. I said, but this big circle represents everything there is about chief of staffness. And you can replace that with your job. This is everything there is about your job, your craft, your sacred art form. And then I said, and this little dot right here, this is how much I know. So I hired you because you have more than, I've never been a chief of staff. I don't have the skills. I don't have the experience. I don't know what that's like. I would be horrible at it, et cetera, et cetera. I'm so grateful for you. And if you think I'm hiring you primarily because of the size of your circle, we're gonna have a problem. But if you think I'm hiring you to see together how big we can explore the circle, we're gonna have the time of our lives. Put another way, high performers wanna be valued for the size of their circle. Meta performers wanna see how big their circle can get. High performers wanna be valued for the size of their circle. Meta performers wanna explore and see how big their circle can get. And so you can imagine while we're doing this, it can be a little uncomfortable. It can be a little intense. Coaching is a contact sport. It's super fun. It can be a little intense. We yell at our clients sometime, which leads us to our second tool here. So tool number 2, shift your values. Everyone say values. Wonderful, just to make sure I'm not losing you. All right, so in any given moment, every person's life is a perfect expression of their values, the hierarchy of their values. In fact, we can show it this way. You can imagine this like a bullseye. So the things at the center of the bullseye are the things that you value the most. The things right outside are the things you value second most, and the things in third is things you value third most. And just because it's not in the center doesn't mean you don't value it. It just means it's not at the center. We're on the same page. And so what's interesting is most conflict, inner conflict and interpersonal conflict, isn't between a good idea and a bad idea, but two equally good ideas that are competing for the center place in your hierarchy, which I find to be fascinating. And here's what I want to suggest. At any given moment, at any given time, most people's primary value is comfort. Most people's primary value, most of the time, is comfort. And I want to explain what the challenge is with this. So when I was in my 20s, I really wanted to be a college professor, except I didn't have the experience, the pedigree, or the age. But I did have a relationship with Pepperdine University. It's the top 50 school, and so I emailed the people who hire there, and I said, hey, look, I know I don't have the pedigree, the age, or the experience, but if you hire me, I'd love to be a professor. I think I'd do a good job, and if you hire me, I promise you'll never regret it. And they were so kind. They ignored my email. And so then I emailed them again, and I emailed them again, and I emailed them again, and I emailed them for like 3 months saying, hey, look, if you hire me, you'll never regret it. If you hire me, I mix it up every now and then, but if you hire me, you'll never regret it. Until finally they emailed back and they said, hey, Jason, we'll hire you if you'll do one thing. And I said, what's that? And they said, stop emailing us. And I said, great, what do you want me to teach? And this is a true story. They said, you can teach whatever you want, just stop emailing us. And so I created a class called Power in the Human Spirit. And it was one of the funnest things I've ever done in my life. It was, I had a blast doing it. And the students there are so bright, so gifted. And one of the assignments that I would give them is to write their own obituary as if they had lived the most amazing lives that they can imagine. The most amazing lives you can imagine. Recreationally, financially, spiritually, relationally, vocationally. Just go window shopping for a ridiculous future and then write it down. And it was always great, except for one category, finances. And here are these kids with immense capacity, talented, brilliant, connected, privileged, immense capacity. They would always say the same thing. Oh, Jason, I don't need to make a lot of money. I just want to make enough to be comfortable. And what I want to suggest to you is every time someone says this, an angel gets its wings ripped off. Now, this is a little controversial, but bear with me, and I'm not going to park here for long. And if you don't agree with me, that's totally fine. I get on a plane later, and it's not a big deal. But what I want to suggest is this isn't about cash. This is about capacity. This isn't about how much you keep. It's about how much you create. And what I want to suggest is people massively undervalue themselves and their capacity to create all sorts of things, including wealth. And you take or leave the money thing, but the idea of, I just want to have a comfortable relationship. I just want to have a comfortable career. I just want to have comfortable finances. I just want to, I'll find a little way to volunteer. I'll find a little way to give. I'll find a little way to, it's all this kind of like garnishing of life. And what I want to suggest is this does not serve us. And by illustrating that, I know I do a lot of raise your hand things. Bear with me, I've got many more. So raise your hand if you like to run. Yeah, there you go, yeah. Nobody likes you. No. I mentioned my dad earlier. He was a basketball coach, football coach, baseball coach. He actually helped start women's soccer in the tri-state area where I grew up. And then he had me for a son who quotes Zoolander, So we got along great. But he taught me a lot of things when I was young. And one of the things he taught me is that you never see a happy runner. Now, I know happy people who run. You're all here right now. But you don't look happy when you're running. You look like you're doing complex math problems in your head. So I don't like running, which you can probably tell because I'm sweating right now. I don't like running. But a long time ago, I heard about this guy named Dean Karnazes. Dean Karnazes is an ultra marathon runner. Bear with me, this is awesome. One time, Dean ran 50 marathons in 50 consecutive days in all 50 states. And then when he was done, he ran home from New York to San Francisco. So this guy is like a living, breathing Forrest Gump. I like running, kind of a deal, right? He did a Badlands marathon in 110-degree heat through Death Valley. It was so hot he had to run on the dotted line of the road, otherwise his shoes would start to melt. Then this is awesome. Then he did a 120-mile relay race against 8 other teams of 12 people each, him by himself. And he actually beat one of the teams. Now, can you imagine being the team that lost? Hi, Bill. Hi, Gary. Hi, Sarah. All the things all the way down. Oh, what team beat us? That guy over there. I like running, kind of a deal. And one time someone asked Dean, why do you run? Why do you do this? And he said this great line. He has a great quote. He said, somewhere along the lines, we've confused comfort with happiness. Somewhere along the lines, we confuse comfort with happiness. And I have found this to be unbelievably true in my life. And here's what I can tell you. If you make comfort your primary motivator, you will be neither comfortable nor happy. And actually, the Harvard education psychologist did a study where they were trying to study burnout. And what they discovered, most people, when they're feeling burnout, what they feel like they need is rest. And that's great, by the way, you should rest. But how many of you have ever gone on a vacation and then when you're done, you needed a vacation from your vacation? Right? It's crazy, right? So here's what they discovered is you cannot rest your way into happiness. You can't rest your way into comfort. You have to do something else. And this is what's interesting is when they studied how people's energy levels were, it wasn't, you should rest by the way, but it wasn't when they rested. What created the energy was when they experienced growth. It was growth that created the energy. So we might say it this way. You want to replace comfort with growth. Or said another way, high performers get uncomfortable so they can be comfortable later. Metaperformers are only comfortable if they are growing. That's their happy place. That's where they love to be. If they're not growing, they get very antsy. And metaperformers enjoy designing their lives around how they can explore their capacity for growth. Now, as you start doing this, you will start moving forward faster. You'll start accelerating in the things that matter to you faster. And this means that you're more likely to run into things, especially things you can't see, which reminds me of our third tool. We call it get wrong. Everyone say wrong. Okay, great. This is gonna be fun. This is gonna be fun. Raise your hand if you've ever been wrong. Yeah, right. So I'm newly married, and I've never known a love like this, and I've never known how wrong I am. I'm new, so maybe the evidence that I'm new is that I said that out loud. But I discovered that I'm wrong a lot. And here's what I want to ask you just real quick. What does it feel like to be wrong? Like when you think about what are the emotions you feel when you're wrong? And oftentimes people give answers like this, like it feels embarrassing, it feels defensive, I feel ashamed, those types of things. That all sounds familiar. And then there's always somebody who's like, I look at being wrong as a growth opportunity, and they probably run, And usually when you think, what is it like to be wrong? I'm like ashamed, embarrassed, defensive, et cetera. And here's what's fascinating about that, is that that's actually not true. That's not what it feels like to be wrong. That's what it feels like to discover that you're wrong. What does it feel like to be wrong before you discover that you're wrong? It feels exactly like being right. Being wrong feels exactly like being right, which then begs the question, if in order to be a metaperformer, I have to get wrong, how do I get wrong when being wrong feels exactly like being right and I can't tell the difference? And one of the best examples of this is from a guy that I really respect. He's one of the best leaders I've ever met. Is a guy named Ed Catmull. Ed Catmull is he wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Creativity Inc. He was the co-founder of Pixar Animation, and then he became the president of Pixar Animation. And then at the same time, he was the president of Pixar Animation, and he was the president of Disney Animation, and he's got tons of kids. So the first time we ever hung out, I had lots of questions about time management. because I was really curious about how that works. And he's been very gracious and has given me multiple times of us having conversations. One of them we recorded for a podcast, and he's such a gracious guy, one of the best leaders I've ever met. And every time I'm around him, every time I've seen him speak multiple times, he always has the same quote. He says, "At any given moment, I have two assumptions. First, that I'm radically wrong about something, and second, that I have no idea what that is." And so for most of us, we put a lot of our energy into avoiding being wrong. We might even subconsciously put energy into avoiding discovering that we're wrong. But for Ed, he gets wrong recreationally. And this is one of the reasons why he's had one of the most profound careers in the history of media, is because he goes into every meeting. He wakes up every morning. I know that I'm wrong about something. Imagine having a feedback conversation with someone like that. Like that, you can't get the more opposite of high performing than that, right? Where he's like, I know I'm wrong. Let's figure it out together, right? And I might say it this way: high performers love to be right. Meta performers love being wrong. And as you learn to enjoy the experience of looking recreationally for getting wrong, this one last piece here, it's very hard to do on your own. Like we say, in coaching, we say, you can't really do surgery on yourself unless you're Dr. Richard Kimball from The Fugitive. And he does surgery on himself. But it's very hard to do surgery on yourself. So you need other people, which is why our last tool is get coachable. Everyone say coachable. Now, of course, I'm an executive coach, and so you can expect me to say something like this, because when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, which is totally fine. But bear with me, I'm not talking necessarily about professional coaching. So my last exercise for raising hands, I got 3 questions for you. Raise your hand if you would say, more or less, that you are coachable. Yeah, very good. Nice and proud. Yeah, very, very good. Okay, great. Now, second question is, raise your hand if you can think of somebody that you know who you would say is not coachable. Yeah, very good. Okay, great. Now the third one's tricky, so pay attention. Now I want you to imagine the person you just thought of, imagine they were here right now. Would they have raised their hand to the first question? Raise your hand if they would have raised their hand to the first question. Yeah, so the mean way to say this is, maybe we're not as coachable as we think. And maybe that's good news. But it begs the question, what does it mean to be coachable? Because everyone thinks they're coachable, but few people are, right? So I want to ask that question. What does it mean to be coachable? And some of you know, I've heard of a guy named Bill Campbell. He's probably one of the most successful coaches in our industry. They call him the $1 trillion coach. He coached Steve Jobs. He coached Sheryl Sandberg. He coached Eric Schmidt. So when they all take over the world, that's his fault. And so Bill's a very talented guy. And he sat one time, he was sitting with a hotshot young, kind of arrogant entrepreneur, and to explore whether they're going to work together. And the hotshot entrepreneur goes, Bill asks the hotshot entrepreneur, Bill says, what does it mean to you to be coachable? And the hotshot entrepreneur goes, well, it depends on who's asking. And Bill says, wrong answer. And he gets up and he leaves, right? Which is, that's awesome. Like, that's a hardcore, that's a flex, right? Because he values his time, and oftentimes people don't. And so here's what I want to explore with you. Like, think about it in terms of a scale of 1 to 10 of coachability. 10 being super coachable, 1 being not coachable at all. Most of us would put ourselves over here. Like, raise your hand just real quick if you put yourself over here. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, yeah, exactly, right? And this is why, by the way, most of us would define coachability as if someone tries to coach me, I receive it. If someone tries to give me feedback, I receive it. Or another way of saying it a little more cynically is, someone tries to help me, I will allow it, right? Like a peasant kissing a ring. You know, you may approach the throne, kind of a deal. I will allow it, right? And that's how most people oftentimes define coachability. And what I want to suggest is we want to move that definition and put it right here. We want to put it as a 5. So allowing coaching in your life makes you a 5. Well, then what's a 10? And here's what I want to suggest. A 10 of coaching isn't when you allow it. A 10 coaching is when you actively pursue it. And just as we're clear, I'm not talking about hiring someone like us. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about mentors, advisors, coaches, therapists, pastors, 12-step programs, sponsors. There are a million ways for you to get access to people. Anyone who is regularly developing you to help you explore what you're capable of constitutes a coaching relationship. And meta performers, we say it this way: high performers allow coaching, meta performers actively seek out coaching. And when your company or your team, or when you can metabolize this into your life, amazing things start to happen. And so I want to end with one last story. The other ones have been entertainment and not that they were entertaining, but about entertainment, about business, and sports. This last one's personal. one of the benefits of being in this job is you're like real close to life transformation. You're like, your fingers are pressed up against it. And frankly, one of the greatest travesties of coaches is that they facilitate life change in others, but they so rarely get to experience it in themselves. And which is why, by the way, don't ever hire a coach who doesn't have a coach. That's like going to the dentist who doesn't go to the dentist. And every coach in our firm has a coach. Our operations team, everybody has a coach. Now, we're a coaching company, so we can do that. But it really does affect our culture. In fact, Andrew Ladd, who's a 2-time Stanley Cup winning athlete, and he's one of the coaches in our firm, he heads up our sport division. He's one of the ones who makes fun of me for not knowing about sports. And he said one time, he goes, Jason, I've been around some of the best athletes in the world and some of the hardest industries in the world, and I've never met a group of people who wants to grow more than being here. And I'm not saying that to say that we're special. I'm saying we're trying to export that as much we can. And so my life has changed as a result of this work. And so I mentioned my parents. I kind of joked about them throughout the talk. And the reality is, when I was a kid, I did not have a good relationship with my parents. And if you would have asked me when I was a kid, what are some of your hobbies? I would have said music, film, and rejecting the love of my parents. and that seemed at the time like the safe thing to do. I went to college. People were homesick when they were in college. I never understood that. I never called my parents once. I was in college for 3 years. Never understood calling my parents. When I got out of college, I lived in Kansas City for a while. That's where I was from. And then bolted to LA. And the relationship was not good. And they didn't like it either. And then I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments when it's like, this is not working. Like, this is not, and I played the game out. I played the game out like 30 years. And I'm like, if this is what we keep doing, this is not going to end well. So I took my own advice and I leaned in, maybe a little too much. Maybe there's a lot of things that were happening in my life that needed some support, but like I leaned into coaching. I leaned into therapy. I went to 12-step program. I got a sponsor. I went to church all the time. I just went like hard in the deal. And in doing that, not surprisingly, I discovered number 3. Like, I discovered how wrong I was about a lot of things. I had a lot of stories about me. I had a lot of stories about my parents. I had a lot of judgments about myself and my parents. And I started like crawling through those, like through a briar patch, right? And it was very uncomfortable. And this is what it looked like. So I started calling my parents. I never called my parents. So I started calling my parents and they were shocked, like, hello? And we would talk, and then my mom would complain about something that I judged my mom for complaining, and then my mom would get hurt that I judged her, and then my dad would get mad at me for hurting my mom, and that kind of a thing. That was like the cycle that we'd go on, and then we'd hang up and I'd be like, this does not feel good, but I'm gonna keep at it. I'm gonna keep leaning in. I'm gonna keep going. And after a while, we started getting to know each other a little bit. And then the calendar year was coming around, and it was the holiday season. It was Christmas time. And the holiday season is like the Olympics for familial dysfunction, right? Like, everyone goes away and they think that they've matured emotionally, and then they go home and spend time with their families and they realize they haven't grown at all. You know what I'm talking about? And there's a saying in 12-step recovery, which is, there's a reason why your family can push your buttons, is because they installed them. And so, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So I was going to mix it up for us when I go home for Christmas time. And I said, Mom and Dad were on the phone. I said, Mom and Dad, we're not going to just sit in our PJs and watch movies until we can't stand each other anymore. What we're going to do, we're going to get dressed. We're going to bathe. We're going to go out. We're going to go do something fun. We're going to have a good time. And I will never forget what my parents said. They said, you want to hang out with us? Like, they were, I said, yeah. And then I wanted to get, my family are notoriously bad gift givers. All right, my whole family. I one time got a gift from my parents on how to be a better parent. Okay, not great. Okay, not great. I do not recommend that. And my dad and my sister will deny that this happened, and they're probably right, but I've been telling this story for years, so I'm not changing it. The memory that I have is that my dad got me an energy-saving shower head for Christmas. You know how a shower head saves energy? By decreasing the water pressure. All right, and I like water pressure. I want to find the amount that kills you, and I want to back it off a little bit, right? And an energy-saving shower head is like getting a back massage with a feather boa, kind of thing. It's like whatever, right? And by the way, you think, oh, energy saving, that's nice. Like, he's going to save your energy bill. I lived in his house. Right, so not great gifts, and so I'm trying to make things better, and I'm not proud of this, but I said, hey Dad, and then you and I, for Christmas, my gift to you is that we're going to go clothes shopping together, because my dad dressed like Jimmy Carter in the 70s. And he was a high school math teacher. And I said, we're going to go shopping together. And my mom goes, your father doesn't want to go shop. And then before she could finish, my dad goes, shh. He says, can we go to the Gap? And then I channeled my inner Ryan Gosling from Crazy Stupid Love. I was like, Dad, be better than the Gap. That is the Applebee's of performance. So I took him to a place nicer than the Gap. And the Gap's great, but I took him to a place nicer than the Gap. And we go there, and I think he's gonna be self-conscious, but he gets way into it. He's strutting on the catwalk and all this kind of stuff. And the people who work there are getting into it. So we're all humming Christmas music and pulling off jeans in synchrony. It was like an episode of Glee. And we're taking pictures of my dad. My mom's not feeling well, so we're texting her pictures, and she's like, I don't like it. And we're like, we're buying it. And so we get all these clothes, and we're driving home, and there's frost on the window, and there's Christmas lights everywhere, and Bing Crosby's on the radio, and it's quiet. And my dad says, hey, I want to tell you something. I said, what's that? And he said, thanks for being my friend. And he said, my dad fought in World War II, and he said he was pretty closed off. He's like, I didn't really have a father figure that way. And actually, I found out later that my grandfather would disappear for weeks at a time. We didn't really know where he went. And so my dad said, so I didn't really know how to be a dad. Your mom and I, we did the best we could. And then he said, and I really feel like if we were at a cocktail party, you would want to talk to me, whether I was your dad or not. And I said, yeah, about 100,000 hours. No, I'm just kidding. And we pulled up to the driveway. And when I was younger, I would have just bolted, grabbed my Game Boy out. But for the first time in my life, I sat in the car with my dad and we just talked while the snow gently fell. And if you would have told me when I was 20 years old that I would recreationally enjoy hanging out with my parents, I would have told you that's impossible. But it was a Tuesday. And I know that's a small story, that's a small thing. It was really big for me. And that's what I want for you. That's what I want for you. That's my hope for you. That's why our firm exists, is we want to hold a space for you to find the people you need to support you, that you would enjoy getting wrong, that you would lean into the discomfort, that you would shift your perspective of your job and yourself, that you would enjoy exploring what you're capable of, and in doing so, go beyond high performance. And that's really what I came to talk to you about. And one last thing. I told you, I was going to tell you what the 100,000 hour rule is. Here's a 100,000 hour rule. Make them count. Thanks, everybody.